Hello gorgeous people. Today I'm going to show you how to create a beautiful mixed media tag. Now I created this for the Nomadic Soul Diaries June Instagram theme, and of course the theme was stars. It had the most gorgeous colour palette, which I have used all of these colours on my mixed media tag. Now, you know I love my sparkles, so I had to create something using some of the new products from Lindy's, which are called Squirts. Now, Squirts are a paint. They're nice and thick and they have lots of shimmer, so they're beautiful for mixed media projects. You can use them as they are and just drip them from the bottle directly onto your project. They're great with textured surfaces. Or you can add them to a small palette, thin them a little with water, and paint with them using a brush, or splatter them, or anything else you like. Now I'm pairing some of my Lindy Starburst sprays with these. I've got 4 gorgeous colours, and of course I'll add the colour names just in the description of this video. Now for this I was looking at using a Tim Holtz mixed media tag, but considering what I wanted to put on it, I knew it would be a bit too thin and flimsy. So I've used the tag as a template and cut a piece of cardboard from some recycled packaging. Now I've got a whole batch of scraps and leftovers on my desk from previous projects, including some beautiful Tim Holtz grunge board wings that I found. I don't even know how long I've had these things, but I've decided that they would be perfect for this project. I've got a Tim Holtz paper doll figure, some beautiful chipboards, some lace, some stars, and a few little scrappy elements from other projects that I'm determined to use up rather than throw away. The first thing I'm going to do is add some heavy gesso to my tag. This will help protect it as I add layers of liquid, because we all know what liquid does to paper, and it's not very nice. So brush on some of that gesso and allow it to dry. Now that the gesso is dry, we can start adding some of our initial Lindy's colours. I'm going to start with the California Poppy Gold spray. I'm going to add this on and then just dry it with a heat gun. Now, if you don't have a heat gun, you can of course let this air dry, but I'm not very patient, so I frequently grab the gun and just give it a blast of hot air to hurry things along. Now that the gold is dry, add a little Tiffany blue. Now I'm doing this one layer at a time so that the colours stay a little bit more separate and don't mix on the tag. Now I'm not saying this won't happen at all, but I won't get as much colour mixing, so the blue will stay bluer. You can see it's reactivated a little bit of the gold and gone a little bit green, but this is to be expected with mediums that are water-based. Again, dry with the heat gun, just to make things a little bit easier for the next colour, which is Delphinium Turquoise. Spray a little of the turquoise over the top. This is a beautiful colour with gorgeous shimmer, and I really love how this looks over the other 2 colours. Once again, dry with a heat gun to set the colour, and we're ready to continue. I'm going to add a few little stars using some Faber Castell Texture Luxe paste. Now I have the gold paste here, but I believe it also comes in silver. This is quite nice and thick, and it's wonderful if you'd like a really raised design. Now I have the wonderful little TCW Constellations mini stencil, and it's got the cutest little stars, so it's going to create a really beautiful pattern for my background. Now, go and wash that stencil off quickly, because if this stuff dries on the stencil, it's really difficult to get off. You can see that it's created a beautiful little pattern of stars with really high raised texture, so that you can see this over the background. Now I love the fact that the gold kind of blends in with my other colours and doesn't look too standing outish, if that's a word, so it won't take over. The next step, once that's dry, is to add some texture paste. Now this is the opaque Crackle from Ranger, and I have to admit I do find that on some surfaces, like this one, if you add too much water over the top once it's dry from other layers, it can peel off. So just be aware that this is something that can happen. It doesn't happen on every surface, and it doesn't happen if you've put acrylic paint over the top perhaps, but if using lots of wet media like Lindy's, this can be an issue. But for this particular tag, it's not going to be a problem. So I've just popped that Crackle paste around the edges and I'm leaving it to dry. And while that's happening, I'm adding a layer of Crackle paste to some of my other elements, those beautiful grunge board wings and a chipboard element I didn't end up using, but I'll keep it for another project. Leave the opaque crackle to dry. Alright, so my Ranger crackle paste is now dry, and as you can see, I've got the most gorgeous cracks on things. Those wings in particular look pretty amazing with all of that crackle. So it's time to grab your Lindy's Squirts. Now, as I was saying before, these are fantastic over texture. I'm going to start with a layer of Tiffany Blue just so everything has a consistent base and looks a little bit like the tag. And then I'm adding some Banff Blue to both the tag and some of my embellishment options, which is the wings, chipboard, some scrap paper, and of course some of that gauze. Now, because it's a water-based medium, you can use some water in a little squirt bottle to help move those squirts around. Now, I haven't added a whole lot because I don't want to dilute it too much. I like that strong colour, but I've added enough to make the colour move, particularly over the top of that crackle paste. Now, I love how the squirts sort of soak in between the crackles, so you get this gorgeous colour on top, but also this beautiful darker, deeper colour inside the cracks, which makes it look so much more interesting. Now, while I was talking, I've added the Polite People Purple. That's also one of those Lindy's Squirts. And while it looks really, really dark on camera here, when it dries, it's the most gorgeous colour. Add a little bit of the Tweedledee Denim. And if you don't have that, you can use Afternoon Delight Denim just over the top to add a little bit more darkness to those colours. Now, if anything looks too wet or too dark, just simply blot it with a paper towel to remove a little of the colour. Leave that all to dry, and then you'll have something that looks like this. Now you can see that the colours are quite a lot lighter when they dry, so it looks quite dark when you add it on there, but it really isn't. So have a bit of a play, perhaps even a test piece, to make sure you're going to get the colour strength you want. These wings are starting to look beautiful. Now, I don't know why I forgot to put purple on one of them, or maybe it just didn't take as well as it did to the gauze, but I'll need to add some more colour to those butterfly wings. But the gauze is looking super pretty, beautifully coordinating with my background. Looking similar but different enough to sort of stand out. Now, I've decided that for a night sky, my tag is just not dark enough, so I'm going to get some Night and Lapis Dina Wakley acrylic paint, mix those two together to get a beautiful custom navy blue, and use that on my tag to add a bit of extra darkness to the tag. Now, you know I love mixing acrylic paint and applying it with a water brush because it lets you get a beautiful transparent result, especially over that shimmery Lindy's. You don't want to cover anything too much, you just want to make it darker. So applying with a water brush, you can squeeze the brush and get a thinner, more transparent colour, or use the paint thickly as almost its original consistency and get a beautiful dark colour. And I'm doing both of these things, you can see here. So over the crackle paste, I'm adding mostly sort of thicker kind of paint so that you get that darkness, especially around the edges. And then as I sort of push the colour towards the middle of the tag, I'm squeezing the brush so that you end up with thinner, more transparent colour, but still the same colour. So it's a beautiful look, beautifully coordinated, and it's really easy to do. So just apply the paint with a water brush and give it a go. It's a really interesting technique that allows you a lot of control over those acrylic paints and gives you another way to use them. Now, make sure to paint the edges so you don't have any naked edges. Always a good look to finish off the edge of a tag or a card with a bit of colour. Now, while the tag is drying, it's time to add a bit more colour to those wings. So I'm just using the same colours of Lindy's Squirts and spraying with water to make the colour sort of bleed into the cracks. See, that's a little bit darker already, but a bit more colour won't hurt it. Keep building up the colour until you're happy with how it looks. I've now grabbed the Lindy's Squirt in Poutine Gold, and I'm going to add a few gold drips onto my tag and onto my wings. Spritz these with water to get the colour to move around, or leave it as is to get much bolder spots of gold colour. I like to do both. I'm adding a few extra drops over the top of some of that crackle paste and making sure I let it sink into the crackles, and that way you'll get beautiful little rivers of gold crackle on the background. Now that it's dry, you can see the results of adding that poutine gold. So if it's over the other Lindy's colours, it's sort of like a gold shimmer, but just look at how that is over those cracks. That is little bits of beautiful yumminess. Looks almost like lapis lazuli with the little gold flecks through it. But now that that background's done, it's time to start pimping up some of my chipboards, and I'm going to use my Lindy's embossing powders to do that. So cover your chipboards with Versamark ink, and then I'm using Prima Donna Purple, Chrome Doesn't Pay, and of course it is Lindy's powders. Now 2 of these are from the new set, and they have beautiful chunky bits in there, mica and all sorts of yummy stuff. So don't expect a flat colour result because they're not going to be a single flat colour. I'm starting with the Prima Donna Purple just to give it a really interesting base, but you can see I haven't covered the entire piece. I've left bits uncovered. I'm covering those additional bits with, of course it is, and that will give a 2-tone background. But I'm not going to stop there. So once I've heat set those first 2 colours, I'm going to put some of the Chrome Doesn't Pay over the top, and that will give a beautiful triple tone effect with silver, purple and pink, which is some of the colours that will coordinate really well with my background. Now, after heating, if you find that there's not enough silver or not enough pink, while the embossing powder is still hot, just add a little bit more on top, and of course it will stick to that heated embossing powder, and you can build up layers of colour and make a really interesting embellishment that is custom for your piece, just like this one. Now, that is different enough to stand out on my background, but it's not really standing out enough for me, or it's not combining enough with the background. Now, of course, I haven't used any blue colours on this because I'd like something with a little bit of variation. Now, I have this gorgeous glittered circle from a previous project. It was going to be on a Christmas card. It never quite made it. So I'm partially covering this with some Versamark. Once covered, I'm covering this with some of the gorgeous Lindy's embossing powder, and I'm going to heat set this. Now, of course, this gorgeous silver embossing powder is not over the entire chipboard piece because I wanted some of that glitter to show through. So it's just covering parts of it. Once the embossing powder is fully melted, you will have the most beautiful, unique, custom embellishment with glitter, with metallic shine. What more can you ask for? I've got a bit of everything on here, and it will be the beautiful, most perfect frame for that Tim Holtz paper doll. So don't ever throw anything away, even if it hasn't worked out on one project. Keep it, change it up. You never know what you might create. Now, I had so much fun with that embossing powder on that piece that I'm going to cover some stars in it. Now, I'm not going to do anything fancy to these, just adding some Versamark ink to make the embossing powder stick, coating them, and heat setting. Now, this is one of the beautiful new embossing powders from Lindy's metallic set, and it is super fine, and when you heat it, just watch what happens. It is gorgeous. The most beautiful, bright chrome effect with a few tiny little dimples in the surface to give the look of metallic, and I love this stuff. Now it's time to start putting the entire tag together. You can see I've got my main elements almost done, but it's missing a bit of oomph. So what I'm going to need to do is really make those colours pop. So I'm going to do this in a couple of ways. But those elements that I know are already in place and exactly where I want them, I'm just going to glue them down with some glossy accents, because half the time what happens is I forget I haven't stuck them down, and I'll pick up whatever I'm working on and tip them all off. And this has happened enough times so that I know I should avoid it. Now you can see how those beautiful silver stars stand out on the background, and that little bit of gauze just helps break up the background colour a little bit and gives me somewhere to stick my additional central elements. Now, I need a bit of white to help make those colours pop, so I'm just going to apply a little bit of that heavy gesso to some additional pieces of gauze, and these will again just help break up that background from my central elements. Now the gauze is already white, but I wanted it to be a bit chunkier and a bit whiter, so adding the gesso really sort of helps move that along and make that happen. Otherwise it's just a little bit too fine and it didn't stand out enough for me. So I've put it in a vague shape that can sit under the chipboard, and you can see even just how doing that makes that chipboard shape and colour pop a little bit more. It just gives me something a little bit extra to work with and separate those two layers. Now, once all of those things are dry, it's time to keep working on the rest of the elements. I'm using some beautiful Art Alchemy paints from Faber, and I'm adding these to both the wings and the edges of my little text piece, just so that they look like they belong with the project rather than are just something sitting on top. So I do like to add a little bit of colour from the base onto some of the top layers, just so it looks like a cohesive element. So the colours I'm using are Crocus Fields and Rosa Moore, and of course they're Faber's metallic Art Alchemy paints. Now I'm using a flat little brush and I'm painting the edges in a darker version of the same colours. So just using the same stuff but thicker, darker, adding more. Whereas what I've done over the cracks and the Crackle paste is add it very delicately, very thinly. Now I'm going to add some of the light patina into the colour scheme here, just to add a bit of that blue element. I'm adding it to both my Tim Holtz text word, Choose to Shine, and again over the wings. Now you can see I'm brushing it off onto some paper, so I really am only adding the tiniest little bit. And then I've decided to add all three of those colours onto my gorgeous embossed silver circle, just so that there's a little bit of that background colour on the top. Now it's time to get a little bit splattery with some Dr. P.H. Martin's Pen White. Now, this stuff is very friendly and very forgiving. All you need to do is dip in a paintbrush and then tap the paintbrush with something hard to splatter the ink everywhere. Now, it's not completely bleed proof, so you may get a little bit of colour coming through or seeping through, colouring the ink, but for most purposes with what I use it for, it's nice and bright and white, especially with these tiny little dots, because it doesn't really reactivate the colour underneath enough for that colour bleeding to happen. But it just makes it nice and sparkly. Well, sparkly looking, not actually sparkly. Now it's time to start adding those final elements. Now it wasn't really separated enough for me, so I've added a little bit of vellum behind that circle just to give a bit of a haze and separate that image from the background, because it was just a little bit overwhelming with all of the colour coming through next to that Tim Holtz paper doll. Now I've used some really neat little 3D foam squares just to pop up that chipboard shape and the paper doll so I can tuck some additional elements underneath. Now it's time to add all of the final touches, which is just a lot of tucked in embellishments to separate the background from the focal point. Now I'm going to use some glossy accents to make sure everything stays in place, and I'm just going to tuck in some beautiful crystals, some pearls, and a bunch of little, I think they're flower stamens that you would use if you're making foam flowers. Most of these are really old Prima stock, and I'm talking like a couple of years ago. So I'm trying to use up some of my older stash. Now I'm sure you can buy things like this on the market, just not from Prima at the moment. I've tucked a few of these in behind everything. And of course, with that vellum separating the front and the back, it really allows that central image to stand out. I love that embossed circle as the background, and I adore the way the wings have turned out. As you tilt them, the shimmer in that Art Alchemy paint changes a little, so you get sort of this beautiful, almost chameleon effect on the wings. It's super cool. Those beautiful little silver stars stand out really well in the background, and you can see that dark acrylic paint we've added against the lighter Lindy's on the background. Looks amazing, and it makes the gold shimmer in those cracks really pop. So between the crystals, the shimmer, the dark, the light, a little bit of Art Alchemy, I think we've made magic. But this was super pretty. So it's a great way to use some old boxes, some scraps that you've got lying on your desk, whether it's gauze or paper, add a bit of texture, add a bit of colour, and make a really cute tag. All of those final elements with the white and the clear crystal over the top of the chipboard embellishments have kind of made it feel like a single piece rather than a lot of bits stuck together. And sometimes it's those last little bits that you add that really pull the project together. I hope you love my project that I've created for the Nomadic Soul Diaries June Colour Challenge. I really enjoyed making this, so I hope you've enjoyed looking at it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've grabbed some really great ideas. But heads up, My next video is not going to be a project. It's what I've been working on during this whole coronavirus crisis, and it was big, but I can't wait to show you. So come back and check out my channel. Make sure that you've hit subscribe and the little alert bell so you don't miss that next project. And I can't wait to show you what I've been working on. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.